Welcome to chapter 14 of the book of Luke. We're continuing with Jesus as he meets these different men of the rulers of the people, the religious rulers. And here it came to pass, in his coming into a certain house of the rulers of the Pharisees on a Sabbath to eat bread, that they were closely watching him. Their process of determining whether Jesus was for real or he was a charlatan, the things that he was saying to them proved that he was a charlatan, but the people saw the miracles that he was doing and knew him to be something other than that. Only God could do these healings. So these people are following him now, but the rulers, they are looking to find something against him. They're closely watching him. And the thing that they would find mostly was what they considered breaking the law of the Sabbath, the seventh day, working, walking, doing the things that they weren't supposed to do on the Sabbath, yet Jesus was doing these things. But they had built up all types of laws on the Sabbath. The Mishnah, Jewish writings of the rabbis at the time of Jesus, you can pick a volume up by Danby, Oxford Press, and you'll see just a plethora of different types of laws that they added, as far as wearing a peg leg would be carrying a burden on the Sabbath, and it just goes on and on and on, where you can see what they were doing. So these men are, I believe, they had a skewed thought process. Their thought process was looking at the law and not mercy, because they were actually making it miserable for a lot of people by finding fault for every little thing to the person. Well, if you find fault with everything a person is doing, you're not going to make very many friends. And they were doing this, and the people saw it, related it to God, that God was doing this, and they would leave God, because who wants a God that puts all these heavy burdens on you that you can't possibly fulfill, although he wasn't actually doing it. And this is what Jesus is bringing the people to show them. And today there's churches that also put heavy burdens on people. If you belong to a church and let's say, no, you can't drink. Well, that's not biblical. There's all types of winemaking for having a good time, and wasn't just medicinal. Jesus drank wine. So there's all types of laws today that different churches put on. That's just one. And then other people who want something like that. And it really hurts the people that want to come to God, because they see this these other things that aren't actually meant by God to be done, to be doing. And so it goes on and it continues. And behold, there was a certain man was dropsical before him, hydropikos. Hydro has to do with water and filling up in the legs and with the tissue. Painful apparently. And this man wasn't dropping down, but had to do with water. In responding, Jesus spoke to the nomikos, the legal experts, nomos, astronomy, we get that word, the nomikus, the people that studied the law, legal experts. And this was the Judaic law at the time was more or less covered both the secular and the religious. I suppose you could relate it maybe to Sharia law, the Muslims today in 2015. And he was responding to them and the Pharisees, saying, because he knew that they looked at these laws and made extra things, is it allowed to cure on the Sabbath? Therapeutics. But they were still. Didn't have anything to say. And taking hold, he healed him and dismissed him. The man was healed. And responding to them, he said, well, which of you, having a donkey or ox that falls into a well, and not immediately will pull him up on the day of the Sabbath? Well, they all would have took care of their animals. And Jesus saw their hearts. Doesn't say that here. In other places, he knew it was inside of every man, it says. So he knew their feeling, and so he brings this question to them. And then he probably knew inside that they were becoming angry at seeing that he is going to do what they didn't think was the right thing to do, because it mentions earlier where the head of the synagogue told the people that it's heal only on the day of the Sabbath. And they were not able to answer to him as to these things. They could have answered, but they were unwilling because he had did this miracle. How can you answer somebody that's done a miracle and people know it's a miracle? If he's saying whatever, the moon is made out of green cheese, and he does a miracle, then you probably would think that, well, the moon's maybe made out of green cheese because you've seen something amazing, even though you don't think it is. They weren't able to answer because the power that he had shut him up. And he spoke to the ones being invited a parable. Apparently other people were coming there, and the paravolene is a parable, is a direct transliteration, that Greek word. Giving heed how they chose the first places, saying to them, well, whenever you should be invited by anyone to a wedding feast, you should not lie down to eat in the first place. So these people are coming and sitting and taking places. And so he just brings this out all of a sudden, and maybe not related to any certain object, but to use this as a point of instruction. You should not lie down to eat in the first place. Well, somebody that's selfish, self-importance, their mindset is on themselves, they would do that. They would think that they were the most important, and you would take first place. Or whenever you hear somebody praising somebody, you think, well, maybe it's probably me that they're talking about, until you find out, well, it's talking about somebody completely different. And that's sort of human nature. I think a lot of us we all have that self-centeredness in us. But Jesus is showing that we need to deal with our self-centeredness, our self-importance. He says, well, you should not lie there, because lest at any time a more important one than you might be invited by him. And having come, the one having invited you and him shall say to you, give place to this one, move over and let him sit down. And then you begin with shame to take the last, eschaton, topon, place. Eschatology, study of the last times. Topography, study of places. You begin to take the last place in shame. So your selfishness basically could cause your shame. And he's showing us that being selfish, you don't want that to happen, but we need to change our attitude towards our self-importance. Basically, he's teaching a mindset of humbleness. And these Pharisees don't seem like this is on the top of their list. But whenever you should be invited, having gone, recline in the last place, that whenever the one having invited you should come, he should say to you, Phile, friend, Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, Phile, friendship. Ascend higher. Come on up here in the front. Then there will be glory to you in the presence of the ones reclining with you. And you're going, whoa, you're humble, but then I believe he's talking about a future with God in heaven here, that when we are in heaven, that Jesus will be putting us in a place next to him, it says, and the glory of being near Christ is what we want. And then he says, for everyone exalting himself shall be humbled, and the one humbling himself shall be exalted. Again, I believe he's talking about when we're in heaven. If you exalt yourself and you think that you're number one, and you find out that you're not, but then the person that's humble and doesn't ever think about being in the first at the front will be exalted. I was volunteering at a rescue mission. I had just come, a fellow needed help, and I went to the rescue mission to find out about getting help for him. Ended up going there and washing dishes. They had that, they were feeding maybe 50, 60 people, and I just thought, this is a good thing. After work, I go there and wash dishes. And so the pastor, one day he asked me if I would go to, it was called the, what's that called? Christian Men's, it's a business association. I can't think of the name of it right now. But he asked me to go with him, and I said, sure, I'll go with you. I wasn't a businessman, never been to a business place or around businessmen or anything. And so we were driving to the place, and I said, well, who's going to be speaking? And he says, I am. Oh, okay. So we walk in there, and there are a couple hundred people. And so we go up to the front, and he says, here, sit down next to me. Wow. I couldn't believe it. Here, what am I doing? Here I'm just washing dishes. And all of a sudden, I find myself being next to the pastor with all these people that was a full gospel businessmen, something like that. So anyway, the man next to me, he says, are you involved in that? It was called the Christian Outreach Mission. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what do you do there? And I said, well, I'm a dishwasher. And he looked and he said, well, I guess we all need dishwashers. So being humbled, and then God is going to be the one exalting. I had no idea. Not that I even deserve to be in the top, but I'm just using that for an example on how God does these things. But I can imagine the opposite. If you think you're going into some place that you're going to be the star of the show, and then as you're going to you think you're going to get up and you're going to be giving the speech to everybody and they're going to applaud, but all of a sudden the master of ceremony says, and here is our featured speaker, and it's somebody completely else, and you're completely ignored and nobody ever calls you. And relate that to heaven. And he said also to the one having invited him, whenever you should make a dinner or a supper, do not call your friends, nor your brothers, nor your relatives, nor your rich neighbors, lest at any time also they invite you in return, and there should be a recompense to you. A recompense is either a reward or a punishment. Could be either way. But he's showing here that the attitude, the person making this dinner to call other people, and he's not interested in us with our making dinners and calling people, but this is a way of telling us that this humbleness, the self-importance, is that we should not be calling somebody that can pat us on the back and say, good job, but instead invite somebody that can't really do anything or reward us. And he says, but whenever you make a banquet, call the poor, maimed, lame, and the blind. And these are the people that we need to reach out for, not just to somebody that can do good for us as we can do. That's no big deal. And blessed you will be, for they do not have anything to recompense to you. Well, God is the recompense that we will have. For it shall be recompensed to you in the resurrection of the judged ones. That's heaven. And this is the whole thing he's bringing out here. An afterlife is more important than the temporal that we are living in right now. The life that we have right now it's going to come to the end. Things are going to be burned, stopped. But yet, when our body dies, we're going to continue into the resurrection of the just ones, God willing, that will be found worthy. And this is what Jesus is bringing out, the resurrection. The Pharisees believed in the resurrections, but the Sadducees didn't. I'm not sure about the scribes. And having heard, a certain one of the ones reclining together with these said to him, well, blessed is the one who shall eat dinner in the kingdom of God. Well, you think, well, sure, that person would be blessed, obviously. And then Jesus says, he said to him, a certain man made a great supper. This man is assuming maybe that everybody that there was there is going to be in the kingdom of God. And Jesus said, a certain man made a great supper and invited many. And he sent his bondman at the hour of the supper to say to the ones being invited, and here he's talking about the Jews, basically, the ones that are there, the Pharisees and so forth, come, for already all is prepared. And they began by one to ask pardon, all of them. The first said to him, oh, I bought a field, agoras, the agora, by agoron, agriculture, and I have a necessity to go forth and to see it. I ask you, have me pardoned. He didn't want to go. And another said, well, I bought 5 teams of oxen, a zevgi, we have a zygote, a spore formed by 2 gametes, if you're a science major, zevgi, zygote. I brought a pentagon, 5-sided building in Washington, D.C., and I go to try them. I ask you, have me pardoned. They didn't want to go either. And another said, I married a wife, and on account of this, I'm not able to come. Another third one. And that bondman, having come, reported to his master these things. So all basically is showing that all the Jews that were invited to come have found excuses, especially when they have faced Jesus. They don't want anything to do with him. Then, being provoked to anger, the master of the house said to his bondman, well, go forth quickly into the squares, the platias, a plate, as a derivative, in the streets of the city. And the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind bring here. Go out and bring other people here, the ones that were not the religious people, the Pharisees. Just go out and get a bunch of people that are the Jews on the whole. And the bondman said, O master, it's taken place as you ordered, and still there is a place. There's place. Topos, topography there. And the master said to the bondman, well, go forth into the ways and fences, and compel them to enter, that my house should be filled. So now they're going out, and I think he's talking about here the Gentiles and away from Israel, and maybe not. For I say to you that not one of those men, having been invited, shall taste of my supper. So those men that found excuses, the Jews, and today people that have heard the good news, that have found excuses not to believe the things of Christ or don't want to do it right now, I say to you that not one of those men, having been invited, shall taste of my supper. Not one. And going with him were great multitudes. So now he has left, or he's around that area, and there's just could be thousands. When it says the multitudes, generally we're talking about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. That's a lot of people to follow one man and his 12 disciples. And having turned, he said to them, well, if anyone comes to me and does not detest his father, patera, paternal, Mitera and mother, maternal, and the Zgineka, wife and children, and brothers, Adelphus and Adelphas, sisters, and still also his own life, he's not able to be my disciple. Wow. Jesus uses this. He doesn't really want us to test our Father or to love our father and mother, but not in place of Jesus. Jesus is putting himself in number one in our lives. And this is where he wants to be. It's the best thing really for us. He's not trying to have us do damage to our friends and so forth, wife and children. But by him being number one, then the best thing is going to happen to everybody. But we have to have him number one. And whosoever does not bear his cross and come after me is not able to be my disciple. Oh, wow. Bearing the cross and coming after, you're not able to be the disciple. What are the bearing a cross? He hasn't went to the cross yet. What's he talking about here? They don't even wouldn't possibly understand what he's talking about, carrying a cross for the crucifixion. I don't think they saw that at all. I don't even know if they could possibly understand what he's saying, but we today know what the stavron is the cross. Coming after him, we're not able to be his disciples. Well, what are the things that are the cross and bearing the cross that come between us and bearing the cross? There's a lot of things. I made a little list and I share it with you. A death of a loved one, if you are going through right now or have gone through the pain and suffering of a loved one, a child or a spouse or parents or a good friend in a war possibly. However, this death of this loved one can be so hurtful to a person that you get mad at God because God has taken away this person that you love. And we don't think about, well, God put that person in our lives. What will we be if we didn't have that person? But anger can come out. And God doesn't want that. He wants us to carry that cross, that hurt, just to bear it and to come after him. He'll take care of whatever it needs to be done. Also, it could be a health issue with a person or a relative. A person can have a really great health and all of a sudden get injured and become a paraplegic and can be mad at God because God allowed that person to come into physical harm and become angry at God and not want to hear anything about God anymore, because why would God let that happen to me? Or it could be a financial failure. You might have all types of material goods, although Jesus says really everything that we own is really God's, and if He gives and He takes away. But then again, if we are selfish and we want these things and we lose them through some type of a financial failure, debts, or stock market crashing, losing the money, somebody ripping us off, all these different types of things, and we take it out on God rather than realizing that the things are really weren't ours anyway. It's just things that we are borrowing. The same with our body and our health. The tent that we are in is borrowed tent that we live inside. It's not us. It's just the outer flesh. Another one can be dreams unfulfilled. We might want to be a wonderful missionary or have some kind of a wonderful ministry. And I know some people that tried everything. Got a building and opened it up to concerts and nobody came. Opened it up to art, nobody came. Opened it up to childcare, nobody came. All kinds of things. And God didn't use them. And could be because the people were doing it what they wanted to do rather than what God would have them do. Maybe God would want them to get jobs and go do certain things, and this was obvious, but they just the person decided not to do what God really wanted them to do, had his own mind, and when it never came to fruition, you get mad at God. It's all God's fault. It wasn't my fault. I did everything I could. I started this, I did that, but yet it all fell apart. So it's God's fault. And get mad at God and walk away from God. Could be broken relationships. You can have a girlfriend. You can be a young person, 18 years old, and you have a wonderful boyfriend or a girlfriend. And the boyfriend or the girlfriend are the love of your life. But all of a sudden, the other person may find somebody else or decide to go to college and not further the relationship, and you become brokenhearted. We've all probably been there when we were younger, and then it goes into broken relationships, can be within marriages. And a lot of people are married, and you may have two things in common. You both love Jesus, and you get married, but then all of a sudden one person decides that they want to go a different direction. They start getting involved with some business or college or job or whatever, and Jesus takes second place. The takes second place. What they want to do takes first place, and they leave, and you get you're divorced. You're left by yourself, hurt terribly, and you just have a hurt within you, and you can't get rid of it, and you get mad at God. Why did this happen to me? Why would it be better off if I never met the person in church? Why did I have to have that? And so you can get mad at God. Well, God brings people into our lives for different purposes. I think he can bring a person into a person's life. Not that God wants the person to get divorced, but I think he'll use that. If a person is still walking with God and the other person divorced that person, the other person that left wasn't a Christian or had walked away, God has something better planned. He has something that will work. Not necessarily better, but it will something that he has planned that will be wonderful for you. And just bear that cross. And all these things are bearing the cross. Another thing that draws us away is a bondage to sin. It could be, there's all kinds of groups for different kinds of sins. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Pornography Anonymous, drugs. I'm surprised there's not Adulterers Anonymous and Pedophiles Anonymous. Just all types of sin that can draw us. Homosexuality is called the sin. God detests it in the Bible. I don't detest homosexuals, and we all sin. So, is it any worse than any other sin? I don't think it is, but it can be worse than some sins. But the things that pull us away, we need the sins that pull us away so easily. We need to fight them and to pray and to take over with self-control and to fight against these urges, whatever they are that pulls us away. That's our bond. That's our cross, is self-control. It takes self-control to pull this cross. What Jesus did, he could have just walked away, dropped it, and said, hey, forget about this. But he didn't. And then he continues, for who from out of you, wanting to build a tower, not having first sat down to tally the expense, sees if he has the things for completion. So when you become a Christian, we need to look and see, well, what is it? What's this all about? Are we going to do it as Christ has us to do it? Are we going to be completed to the end? Remain until the end, and they will be delivered, the ones that remain until the end. That lest at any time, having set its foundation and not being able to complete it, you don't wait until the end, all the ones viewing should begin to mock him, saying that, well, this man began to build and was not able to complete. So you accepted Jesus, but you weren't willing to go through to the end. Or what king, Vasileus, a basil plant, basilica, derivative, going to engage with another king in polemics, arguments, does not sit proton first to consult if Venatos is able with Deca 10,000 to meet the one with 20,000 coming against him. Well, am I able to do this? We are with Christ. But if not, still being at a distance, having sent an embassy, he asks for terms of peace. So then everyone from out of you who does not send away to all the things he himself possesses is not able to be my disciple. Well, now you can take this literally, and people go out and give everything you have away, and then you're broke, poor, and then you're begging. I don't think that's what he wants. I think the key here, as I see it, is possessing. Everything I look, Psalm 73, it's taken me probably 72 and a half years to figure this out, but everything that I own really isn't mine. It's Christ's. He gave it to me, and if somebody wants it bad enough, then I should be open enough to give it to them. Now, that doesn't mean that if somebody walks up to you and asks for everything that you own, you're just supposed to go out and give them everything you own. There's a certain amount of consideration of these things, and when you run across people that want these things, but the idea is to possess, not to hold on, not to grip them. It's not the most important thing to us. What's most important is Christ. And if we lose everything, whatever, we are never going to lose Christ. Christ is not going to ever leave us, no matter what. And he's been with me through thick or thin. I had a relative who was cursing, Jesus Christ this, Jesus Christ that. I got finally tired of it and told them, and the person that was with us was Christian also, and mentioned about, he shouldn't be taking the name of the Lord God in vain. And saying, vain, what's vain mean? That doesn't mean anything. Jesus Christ, vain, what? And then I just said, he says, I don't understand. I said, I know you don't understand, but I've gone through a lot of emotional problems with people in my life, and all the problems I've had, Jesus has stayed with me through thick or thin, and he's always been there. Even when I walked away from him, he still followed me, waiting for me to turn around to come back to him. And he's forgiven my sins. I love him more than anything. So when you say that, it hurts me, because it would be like if I said something bad about your wife. If I started calling her names, she's a whatever, you wouldn't like that. And so whether or not that took, I don't know. But again, Jesus finishes and says, well, salt is good. But if the salt should become insipid, by what means shall it be salted? Well, salt is tangy on your tongue, and you eat things and it brightens it up, makes it better. But if you're not doing these things, making things better for other people, then what good are you? You're just basically insipid salt. You're not doing anything. Neither for ground nor for manure is it fit. You're useless, and many people are insipid, not doing any good for other people. And they throw it outside. And Jesus, I think, is talking here about heaven and the judgment. And he continues and he says, the one having ears to hear, let him hear. Ota is an ear. Otoliths, little bones in the ear. I used to work in the fish industry, and as an observer, I had to go cut these little ear bones out, and the ear bones are like topographic mountains where you have layers, and each layer is a year, just sort of like the rings in a tree, otolith. And you can tell how old the fish is by the layers in the otolith. And I had one of the men at the fish plant. So they asked me, what are you doing? I told him, and he told him what it's for. And he says, well, can they do that with human ear bones? And I was like, I don't know. That's a good question, if they can tell how old you are by your ear bones. So I don't think so. But anyway, the one having ears, if you have ears, we do to hear. If you have, we all have ears to hear, but are we hearkening? Well, let him hearken. Be another word. If you can hearken, and that's understanding it and taking it in, take in the things that I'm saying, he's saying. We continue with Jesus as he meets the next group of people in the land of Israel and the situation. And we'll get to that in the 15th chapter. Hope you'll join us, and God bless.